The following podcast may be disturbing to those who support hatred, terrorism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to How We Fought Against. And today we have a very special guest and a friend, Gideon Falter. Hello, Gideon. Thanks so much for taking the time and being here with us today.
Hello, Aoife. Great to see you.
Thank you. You too. There's a lot to talk about. You guys are doing amazing work, but I think, your greatest accomplishment, not just in the sense of the organization or as a personal accomplishment, but just generally as an accomplishment for humanity, is what just happened last week with this incredible report coming out of the Equality and Human Rights Commission in England in regards to the Labour Party. So just so if people don't know the story, it's been years since the way that you've conveyed it, and I think we were all aware of it, that Jews in the UK and outside the UK, and I'm sure not just Jews, started feeling very, very uncomfortable, let's say, that's an understatement, with the type of rhetoric coming out of the Labour Party in recent years, something that bordered on anti-Semitism and often actually crossed that line into outright anti-Semitic statements and rhetorics. And so I heard you guys say, or there were publications in the media, that up to like 50% of British Jews were actually considering immigrating out of the UK because of that reality. So you guys decided to do something that by saying that it's a crazy idea. Now looking in retrospect, after you've succeeded, it may sound reasonable for people, but that is, beyond creative, beyond brave, beyond, groundbreaking, is to decide to attack, to go out and expose the Labour Party. It's the Labour Party. It's not some fringe party that, that you can just attack. It's a mainstream, conventional part of
Britain's two main parties. Yeah.
Exactly. And so 5 years ago, you guys make the decision that enough is enough. Something needs to be done about it. And you start, this journey that we know just ended successfully a few days ago. So, if just to quote what you were saying, I think in your press release, is that the Equality and Human Rights Commission report found that there were unlawful acts that were heavily criticizing the former leadership of the Labour Party under, of course, Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, and that the Labour Party became institutionally anti-Semitic. And then they go on to say that clear recommendations that there will be zero tolerance for anti-Semitism and robust framework to make sure that the party complies. Now, can you explain that to us, please? First of all, what does that mean, that institutionalized anti-Semitism has been found to exist in the Labour Party? And second, what kind of mechanisms can they put into place, or have they put into place, that will make sure it will not repeat itself?
So the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the EHRC, was actually created by the Labour Party. So this is how crazy this whole story is. We've got a Labour Party which historically in Britain has been responsible for pretty much all of our anti-racist legislation, and they've been at the forefront of the fight against racism in politics. They created the Equality and Human Rights Commission to enforce equality and human rights in the UK. That was the simple starting point. And in the end, they ended up being condemned by the very organization that they created to protect minorities. So this has been a huge turnaround and a truly disturbing turnaround. I remember in 2015, the first time someone actually told me who Jeremy Corbyn was. Our head of political and government investigations came to me and said, we need to have a talk about Jeremy Corbyn. And I said, I'm sorry, who's that? Because he was this backbench fringe MP who nobody really heard of. He hung out in, side rooms in university campuses and fringe meetings talking about the Zionists. And no one really knew who he was. He was just a sort of lifelong rebel on the backbenches of the Labour Party. You know, in Parliament, they all sit on benches and the people at the backbenches are basically the least important. He was on the very last row. He was the guy who you generally didn't hear of. And when they first talked to me about Jeremy Corbyn, we had a file on him, but it wasn't a thick file. And they said, look, this is a guy who calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends. There was Sheikh Raed Salah, who was actually banned from the UK for promoting the blood libel that Jews use the blood of non-Jewish children. And Jeremy Corbyn welcomed him to tea in Parliament. He wrote a letter to the Church of England defending Reverend Stephen Sizer, who had said that Mossad was behind 9/11. So this is someone who has a deep problem with Jews.
Right, yeah.
And he is seeking election to become leader of the Labour Party. The final result, of course, that came through when the EHRC, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, published its report, the final result was a total vindication of all that we've been saying for years, which is this man has been engaging in deeply problematic acts himself, but much more importantly than that, not just about this man, the Labour Party. The Labour Party has become institutionally anti-Semitic, which means that as an organization, anti-Semitism has become systemic within the party. And so what the EHRC does, it has quite forceful legal powers. And it's told the Labour Party, you have until 10th of December to come up with a plan. The plan needs to include your approach to creating a complete culture change in your party, and also some very robust and practical steps, such as you have to create an independent disciplinary process so that when someone makes a complaint of anti-Semitism, it doesn't just go into your normal process. It ends up in an independent process which you do not control. You cannot interfere politically anymore in anti-Semitism allegations and investigations. This is now going to be a completely separate disciplinary process, which you must have in place according to this action plan, which will be agreed on the 10th of December and will actually become legally binding. So it's not like they can just come up with a plan and not implement it. The EHRC is actually going to force them through the British courts to execute the plan that will be agreed.
So I think that, your process in getting to where you got also contributed to that conclusion, if I'm not mistaken, because the process was, you started, with the Labour Party. You were trying to get the Labour Party to listen, to take that into account, to review your materials, your complaints. I think you filed several complaints before finally giving up, right? They basically told you, we're not going to do anything about it, so I think that is also in thanks to the process that you had to go through, which I'm sure was unbelievably challenging. Can you share with us today, looking retrospectively 5 years ago, did you think that this has any chance of success at all? This is so uniquely groundbreaking. What were your thoughts on that when you started?
When we started, there was actually a process. We didn't actually start approaching the Equality and Human Rights Commission until 2017. Okay, so when Jeremy Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party, that was 2015. We see this deeply problematic guy. We start to see anti-Semitic incidents within the party going unanswered. So one of the first ones was the late Sir Gerald Kaufman, who was Jewish, said in Parliament to Jeremy Corbyn's Shadow Justice Minister that British Jews were donating to the Conservative Party in the UK in order that Israelis could, quote unquote, shoot Arab-looking people.
Right.
Arab-looking people. So, this is a crazy allegation. And then we have a Labour MP, Naz Shah, saying that Israelis needed to be transported to America. Does she mean all Israelis, or does she mean just Israeli Jews? I think it's pretty clear who she meant. We had Ken Livingstone, the former mayor of London, saying that Hitler was supporting Zionism up until he went crazy and killed 6 million people. These are, completely perverse statements, disgusting statements, and racist statements, which are being repeatedly uttered by senior people within the Labour Party. And each time, Jeremy Corbyn's failing to act properly.
Yeah.
or failing to act at all. And so the first thing.
So Livingston also got, the formulation that David Hirsch named after him, right? The
Yes.
Livingston formulation for.
And which, by the way, has now been found to be illegal by the EHRC. One of the most fantastic findings, one of the findings which we're really pleased about, which is, a total vindication again of what we've been saying for years, is that the Livingston formulation is unlawful. It's not just an anti-Semitic thing to say to remind everybody, the Livingston formulation is when you accuse somebody of anti-Semitism and they retort back to you, you don't really mean it. What you're just trying to use anti-Semitism as a means to stifle criticism of Israel. So what it does is it takes a Jewish person's legitimate claim of anti-Semitism and it turns this Jewish person into a member of a conspiracy consorting with Israel in order to protect that state. So it contains a number of things. It contains the dual loyalty trope, which is that Jews are more loyal to Israel than to their own country, and also that they're part of a conspiracy which is speciously using anti-Semitism as a means by which to further a political goal. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission actually has now found that doing that is illegal. So the Livingston formulation is now unlawful in the UK.
Yes, it's the blaming the victim tactic that we already as a society as a whole understood that this is a complete dishonest attempt to approach the actual problem. It's a tactic to divert. And so finally it came to the understanding that also when talking about anti-Semitism, if you don't want to, this is a way to divert and to kind of blame the victim. And this is a tactic that was so commonly used, still commonly used around the world, unfortunately.
And this is where we start to get seriously concerned, because it's 2016. This is happening with impunity, and the Labour Party instituted something which you may recall called the Chakrabarti Report. And Shami Chakrabarti is a leading human rights barrister in the UK. She was in charge of an organization called Liberty, which is all about human rights. And Shami Chakrabarti gets put in charge of conducting a review into anti-Semitism within Labour. And as soon as it was announced, we said, this thing is not independent. The terms of reference have been deliberately designed to stifle the report. It's going to be a sham. And of course, when the report comes out, it's a total whitewash. It's a total whitewash. And in fact, at the press release announcing the report, a Jewish MP left the room in tears, being accused of orchestrating a right-wing media plot in front of Jeremy Corbyn and Shami Chakrabarti, who did nothing. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn left the room eventually when the meeting ended with that activist laughing and joking with him. Wow. And so we saw this as deeply disturbing. And we started thinking, okay, look, we've been exposing Labour's anti-Semitism problem in the media. We know that large numbers of people in Britain are seeing what we're saying and agreeing with us, but it's not good enough to just hold them to account in the media. We need to find a legal means of holding them to account. And the next year, 2017, every year the Labour Party holds its annual conference. And at this one, it was a deluge of anti-Semitic incidents. We were hearing constantly, all day long each day of the conference, we were hearing from people that there was awful anti-Semitism going on. For example, in one meeting, they were saying that we need to have a discussion, Holocaust, yes or no, as in let's allow ourselves to debate whether the Holocaust, yes or no. This is at the Labour Party, which was the anti-racist party of Britain. 70% of Jews.
Whether the Holocaust even happened, that was the question.
That was the activist at that meeting said we need to be able to debate the Holocaust, yes or no.
Wow.
Take from that what you will. So, and what we were doing at the time, we were already at that point calling the Labour Party institutionally racist, institutionally anti-Semitic. It was deeply unpopular. I mean, this is a party for which 70% of British Jews vote normally, or they used to vote, and we were calling them out. And so it wasn't popular within some parts of the Jewish community either. But the point is, we're not a political organization. We treat all political parties equally. And if they're going to get involved in promoting anti-Semitism or allowing their activists to do that, we'll go for them. And so in 2017, during this conference, this was happening, we first approached the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And it was a big gamble for us because we hadn't dealt with the Equality and Human Rights Commission before. In its entire history, the EHRC had only conducted one investigation, one statutory investigation. And that was into a police force. It wasn't into a political party. It had never done an investigation like this, and it has certainly never done one like this into a political party. So we made the approach, and the EHRC did something extraordinary during that Labour Party conference, which you as a lawyer will appreciate, because in law you have this concept of innocence until proven guilty, which, by the way, I'm also quite proud is very much a Jewish concept.
Right, it is, yeah.
We get this statement from the Equality and Human Rights Commission saying that so much anti-Semitic stuff has happened in Labour, and that their words are, the Labour Party needs to do more to prove that it is not an anti-Semitic party. So they flip. They say, wow, basically, look, we're seeing so much coming out from the Labour Party, we're actually going to flip the standard here. You need to prove that you're not anti-Semitic. And we talked to the EHRC for months because we wanted to make sure that we really understood the process. We wanted to understand what their approach was going to be as an organization, because it's a big risk to us. This is the most important thing at that point to British Jews and to the future of having British Jews in the UK. And you don't want an organization to be investigating this until you've really understood actually, you know, what is that organization? What are they going to do about it? So we had to really understand who the EHRC were and what their methodology was going to be for investigating something.
Yes, because
like
I mean, just imagine if they had come back with a different conclusion. I mean, this is not anti-Semitic. This is perfectly okay. This is freedom of speech. This is political criticism.
Exactly, or even some kind of middle ground where they say not that it's not anti-Semitic, but maybe that it's not their job to investigate. You know, we what we didn't want to do is basically put this into the hands of an organization, which then maybe would come back a few years later saying, actually, wrong address. It's not, you know, this is not something we deal with. So we were cautious, but we spoke to the EHRC and they explained to us basically how things work. But I don't think the EHRC exactly knew how it would do something like this either, because, you know, this was a completely new approach for them. This is something they hadn't done before. So in 2018, we referred the Labour Party formally to the EHRC. And the reason we did that was because we had made complaints to the Labour Party, 3 complaints at that point, about Jeremy Corbyn himself. And in fact, they tried ignoring them. So we brought a couple of thousand people outside Labour headquarters in London, and we gave them all copies of a complaint letter to sign and give to the Labour Party. So the Labour Party then received thousands of complaints, or hundreds of complaints from us. And they then wrote back to us acknowledging that they'd received the complaints and saying that they had decided not to even investigate them. And so then we went to the EHRC and said, look, this is the basis for our referral. It's that there is so much political interference in the disciplinary process within the Labour Party that we can't trust the Labour Party to police itself, to regulate itself. We need you to come in and investigate the Labour Party yourselves. And that's what they did. And we put in hundreds of pages of evidence and legal argument. We have worked on this for a very long time. And one of the most difficult things to do has been also to work on this without saying a word to anybody. Right up until the minute the report came out, we did not say anything.
Yeah.
And that has been a very long, very tiring process. And thank God, it has been the most worthwhile process. I think throughout the world, British justice is renowned as being one of the fairest systems of justice that man has yet created. And we, British Jews, have been looking at what happened in the Labour Party, saying, where is the justice? When is there going to be justice for us? When is British justice going to arrive on the scene? And with this report, the Equality and Human Rights Commission did the most thorough job. It truly is a very thorough piece of work. They went as far as the law would allow them to go in reaching their findings. And they have come up with a set of recommendations, which are not really just recommendations, they're mandatory,
Yeah.
which really is going to, I'm confident that they are going to succeed in transforming the way that the Labour Party deals with anti-Semitism. And that is not to say that the work is done. We still have a huge amount of work left to do over the coming months and years. You know, it took Jeremy Corbyn nearly 5 years to completely corrupt the Labour Party in the way that he did. And I'm sure it's going to take a significant amount of time to undo the damage that has been done there.
So let me stop you here, and
Sure,
I'm wondering.
Otherwise I could talk about this forever.
I know, because what you just said I thought was very interesting, because you said that Jeremy Corbyn corrupted the Labour Party, but just putting my lawyer's hat aside for a minute and just speaking to you as a Jew and as an activist. I mean, when we were looking at what came out of the Labour Party for that, for a long period of time, for about 5 years, if not more. We were very, very concerned. And the question has always been, how did we get to this? I mean, again, it's not a fringe organization. This is not some small group that no one cares about. It's the Labour Party. So, by saying Jeremy Corbyn corrupted the party, do you think that really covers the essence, the root of the problem, or what is the root of the problem, and how do you kind of weed it out?
The problem has always been there. Most of what Jeremy Corbyn did that was so problematic in relation to Jews, the worst things were actually before he became leader. And I'll give you one example. In 2010, it's Holocaust Memorial Day, which is in the UK, it's the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It's a very solemn day. And all throughout the UK, there are commemorations going on to mark the what happened, the Shoah, the liberation of the camps, the untold death and murder and barbarity that was visited upon the Jews of Europe. But not Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn uses that day to organize an event in Parliament called From Auschwitz to Gaza. And at the From Auschwitz to Gaza event, they have the first speaker who comes on and says that the Jewish religion has been supplanted by the Holocaust religion, whose high priest is Elie Wiesel. And people stand up at the event. There are anti-racists in the room, and they stand up and they say, you can't say that, that's racist. And Jeremy Corbyn says, you guys need to stop interrupting the speaker, or I'll have the police in the corridor throw you out.
Wow.
And the next speaker dials in from Gaza, and he says that the Nazis successfully Nazified the consciousness of their victims.
Wow.
Just unpack that for a second. The Nazis turned the Jews into Nazis. On Holocaust Memorial Day, that is what Jeremy Corbyn did in 2010.
In the parliament.
In the Houses of Parliament. Now, not only that, he's got a whole history of this. In 2011, the next year, he tried to, he was one of the supporters of a motion in Parliament to remove the word Holocaust from Holocaust Memorial Day. Just Memorial Day. Why do you do something like that unless you have a problem with Jews? So this is the kind of person Jeremy Corbyn was before he became leader of the Labour Party. In order to become leader of the Labour Party, people needed to nominate him, knowing his history, maybe not knowing as much about his history as they do now, but knowing some of his history and his politics. And they also had the membership of the Labour Party had to vote for him. And in a way, Jeremy Corbyn was the beneficiary of a whole series of incredible flukes that got him into power. But the reason I said that Jeremy Corbyn corrupted the Labour Party is because until then, the Labour Party had held on to its roots as an anti-racist party. It had problems within it. One of the problems was Jeremy Corbyn, but it was an anti-racist party. During the years of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, it ceased to be an anti-racist party. It became a party which was institutionally anti-Semitic and racist towards Jews. And that is one of the reasons that the Equality and Human Rights Commission's report is so damning, is because it basically takes you through what was going on in the Labour Party. It takes just a sample of what was going on in the Labour Party, it examines it, and it very clearly tells us that the Labour Party had systematically changed so that, for example, Jeremy Corbyn's office was able to interfere in disciplinary complaints with regard to anti-Semitism. And it even contrasts them. It says, look, when a claim is made for sexual harassment, the Labour Party does the right thing. When the Labour Party got it wrong, it reformed. It was able to police itself, but not on anti-Semitism. When there's anti-Semitism in the party, the Labour Party turns into what we then saw.
The Labour Party is not even willing to look into it. It's not even that they came to the wrong conclusion. They were not even willing to look into that. And I think that was the most damning part of the story at that point. Though, you know, a lot of people, I mean, this is a completely different situation, but a lot of people have been looking with a great deal of concern at the growth of, let's say, an element that is very radical within the American Democratic Party that is somewhat anti-Semitic itself. I mean, I think the situation is very different because they're not, at least I hope, are not close to the position of power that Jeremy Corbyn had when he was the leader of the Labour Party. So it's not within the, you know, the high echelon of the party, let's say, not yet as far as we know. But this is something that I think, you know, people are looking at what you have accomplished or what has become of the UK Labour Party, and then kind of trying to see what's going on in the United States in the hopes that it will never get to be as bad as it got in the Labour Party. But I think it does give hope in a sense that, you know, just civilians like yourself can rise up and do something that is completely, you know, feels impossible and make a world of difference, just a world of difference, or at least that's what we're hoping. So let me ask you something. I know that, you know, on that, I think the very same day, you took the recommendations of the commission and you filed complaints again within that, I assume the new mechanism, or filed complaints to the Labour Party against Jeremy Corbyn himself, and then I think 15 other members of the Labour Party, including very high up members of the party. So, and I think it was the same day or the day after that the Labour Party literally kicked Jeremy Corbyn out, officially out of the party. And so do you think that's related? And what do you think is going to happen with the other 15 complaints?
So a couple of things there. Number one, to people in the United States who are watching what happened in the Labour Party, yes, the situation is different there, and there are problems within the Republican Party. There are problems within the Democratic Party too. And you know, one of the strengths that we came to this whole situation with was that we're not political. And so when we look at something, we look at it objectively and not on a political basis. And I think it's very important that American Jews in their dealings with anti-Semitism in politics also have to come to it not from a bipartisan point of view, but a completely non-partisan point of view. And so that's been very important. We've actually had a lot of contact from people in the US who would like us to help them with dealing with that problem. And in fact, we are planning to help American Jews more and more. And people who want to find out about that, we've actually set up a website, antisemitism.us, where they can do that. But you know, on what happened with these other complaints against other senior figures in the Labour Party, you know, we weren't sure what was going to happen on the day of the report exactly, because the report was released at 10 a.m. At 10:15, we had our press statement. At 10:30, we had our press conference. At 11 o'clock, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn's successor, had his press conference. And Keir Starmer is a figure who has been confusing a little bit in his approach to anti-Semitism, because he's, as many people point out, he's married to a Jewish, he's married to a Jewish woman. His children are Jewish. And yet he stood by Jeremy Corbyn's side as one of his chief lieutenants for years. And right up until December last year, he was saying he's 100% behind Jeremy Corbyn. He was not criticizing him over anti-Semitism, not publicly anyway.
You know, we always say that the fact that you're Jewish doesn't immune you to being a complete moron.
Right. Well, look, we've just won. There was a libel case brought against us just now by, in fact, one of the founders of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the UK, who's the son of a rabbi. And we had called him a notorious anti-Semite because of various breaches, in our opinion, of the international definition of anti-Semitism, the EHRC definition. And we'd called him a notorious anti-Semite, and he sued us for it. And his claim in the High Court just got struck out. And the High Court said, no, it was permissible for us to call him a notorious anti-Semite in the way that we did it. So, you know, being Jewish definitely doesn't immunize you. But, you know, in Keir Starmer's case, you know, he's got Jewish family. He's got a connection to the Jewish community. But he also stood by Jeremy Corbyn's side for years and said he was 100% behind him. So at 11 o'clock on the day of the release of the report, Keir Starmer stands up to do his press conference. And we'd actually spoken in advance to a number of the journalists who were going to be asking him questions at that press conference. And we said, look, ask about Corbyn. Let's find out what he plans to do. And at that point, there was a fork in the road. Keir Starmer could either say, I'm responding to the report by suspending Jeremy Corbyn, or he could resist on that front. And what we saw was that he resisted. And two things happened. One was that we had prepared a 72-page complaint letter against Jeremy Corbyn and various other senior Labour figures over anti-Semitism in the party. And that was ready to go. And the reason we hadn't sent it was because we were anticipating that Jeremy Corbyn himself would respond to the report. And we were anticipating that Jeremy Corbyn would respond to the report in the way that only Jeremy Corbyn would, which is that he would say, it's almost like standing outside the court, you know, on the steps of the court after you've been found guilty in a trial and saying, this is ridiculous, the judge was wrong. It's that ridiculous. And that's what Jeremy Corbyn said. He said that actually anti-Semitism had been overstated for political reasons to make him look bad.
Right.
And the Equality and Human Rights Commission basically, you know, they got it. They don't, you know, the whole thing was overblown. And so we included that within the 72-page complaint letter. We waited to send it to see what Jeremy Corbyn was going to say. And he said exactly what you would expect him to say. We sent the letter to Keir Starmer's office, and within the hour, first of all, a lot of journalists were talking about it, and it made, you know, it made the news in a big way in the UK. But within the hour, we heard back that Jeremy Corbyn had in fact been suspended. And I think actually this is one of the most important things to remember, that throughout all of this, one of the best ways that we've had of demonstrating how despicable anti-Semitism is, and also how stupid anti-Semitism is, are the people who are actually anti-Semitic. If you look at Ken Livingstone, for example, the former mayor of London, who we were talking about, the person after whom the Livingstone formulation is named, when you look at his claim that Hitler was supporting Zionism, it's disgusting, it's a perversion of history, and it's stupid. And Ken Livingstone went to absolutely every outlet that would allow him to speak and repeated it and repeated it and repeated it. And there is no better way of demonstrating the stupidity and ugliness of anti-Semitism than letting anti-Semites speak about it. And we don't want them to speak about it, but when they do, my God, what an example they make for themselves. And Jeremy Corbyn himself, you know, on the day of the report's release, as Keir Starmer said, it is a day of shame for Labour. In fact, one might say it's a few years of shame for Labour. And everybody in the Labour Party is taking in the gravity of the situation that Jeremy Corbyn brought them to. And there is Jeremy Corbyn and a few of his supporters saying, you got it all wrong. The entire thing has been concocted and overstated in order to make us look bad. And that, I think the British public looks at that and they say, no, we don't like this. We don't like this at all. And we saw it, in fact, in the polling after the election defeat that Corbyn suffered. It was the worst election defeat for the Labour Party in decades and decades. And Jeremy Corbyn was one of the reasons for that, because in the polling we saw after the election, people didn't like his personal values and they didn't like the anti-Semitism they saw within the party. And it's really important for Jews around the world to remember this. If you live in a decent country, the chances are that your countrymen, they won't have necessarily met a Jew. They won't necessarily be thinking about anti-Semitism. They might never even have thought about anti-Semitism, or they might have even had to Google what the word means. But the chances are they don't like it. People are not excited about people who hate Jews or incite hatred towards Jews or make Jews feel that they need to leave the country. In fact, most people are pretty disgusted by them. And I think one of the things that has come out of this is not just that British Jews' faith and our faith in the British justice system was absolutely well-founded, but also our faith in our country and the people around us was well-founded, because the people of Britain did not like what they saw.
I think there is another reason to why this is, I think, inspiring what happened in the UK, but, you know, maybe it's just because it was bad enough. But what people tend to do, and you were talking about, you know, bipartisan, and this is a non-political issue, and I think you're absolutely right. But what people tend to do nowadays is to kind of stick by what they believe is their camp. So they don't really bother to examine every issue and might have, you know, different opinions about different issues in regards to the platform of different parties. They just kind of stick to their camp, and they will live and die by their camp, even if their camp is doing something that is completely wrong in every respect. And I think, and as I said in the beginning, it might have been that it gotten just too, you know, bad enough for the, you know, citizens of the UK to stand up, or maybe that is something unique about the British society. But, you know, it came to a point where, if I'm not mistaken, you also had a lot of supporters and lawyers that helped you, that came from within the Labour Party, and they were brave enough to stand up and say, you know, I might be supportive of the Labour Party on 1, 2, 3, and 4, but this has gone too far, and I'm standing up and doing something about it, even if it means harming the party in the narrow sense, in the short run. So I think that's extraordinary. But, you know, just to finish that question, that issue of Jeremy Corbyn, do you think we will see more of him in public life? Do you think he will remain, you know, in this arena and try to influence public opinion on these vile issues going forward?
Look, Jeremy Corbyn is not the kind of anti-Semitic racist with the good sense to know when he's wrong. He's the kind of person who we've seen considers himself to be very principled. He's very proud of the fact that he doesn't change his mind. And he's been wrong on anti-Semitism, not since he became leader of the Labour Party, but pretty much for decades. He's been around a long time. And we don't expect him to change his ways. So I'm sure that we will continue to see, and we have seen, by the way, since the report was published, we've seen more of Jeremy Corbyn. Look, he is not going to return to the leadership of the Labour Party. He's not there is not a risk that he's about to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and have the power of you know, the state power behind him. But he is going to be staying around. I'm sure he will continue to speak out, and we're going to be watching that very carefully. But you know, we're going to be watching him in just the same way as we watch a whole number of problematic individuals from around politics. We're going to be keeping an eye, and we will be taking action if we think action needs to be taken at some point.
Well, that's incredible, and I'm sure you're gonna keep track of the Labour Party if they really do now, you know, change their course, look into these complaints, and actually do what is right and what they should have been doing to begin with. But just before we finish, I have to bring up another story that I just love. Gideon, something that you've done that I think also was very successful. It was absolutely creative, but it was also successful, and that's the story with Twitter. And you know, following a lot of these anti-Semitic tweets that were just vile, beyond vile, disgusting to you know, to any person with a brain. And Twitter refused to take those tweets down and the accounts, to shut down the accounts. And you guys just came up with this brilliant idea. You just went to the headquarters in London, and I'm gonna put a link for everyone here that is listening to see the video, because the video is great. And I think it said something like, Twitter, we are all sick of your mess, clean it up. And something like Twitter, home of hate, right? And you just kind of had it podcasted on the building.
So there was this British rap star who was, or not rap star, but a rapper at least, who was putting out constant stream of anti-Semitic tweets. I'm talking like every few seconds, and these tweets were bad. They were calling for Jews to be shot, a war between Black people and Jews. He was calling for a war between Black people and Jews to happen. It was pretty terrible. Twitter were refusing to take down his account. He had 500,000 followers. And one of the things that we did to really expose and put pressure on Twitter is that we hired one of those vans that they have at like massive rock concerts, which has a laser projector inside it, which can project extremely bright, detailed images onto buildings. And so we took it to Twitter's headquarters in London, and we made an animation of, which you'll see on the link, of this little Twitter bird that flies onto the building and starts excreting anti-Semitic bird poo. So each bird poo contains an anti-Semitic tweet, and it does this until the whole Twitter building is covered in bird poo, at which point a giant hand comes and cleans it off, and the message left is, Twitter, we're all sick of your mess, clean it up. And the next morning, Twitter called us and they'd taken down the account. So yeah, that was probably one of the more creative ways, but sometimes you got to get creative with these people.
You have to get creative with these people. So Gideon, so this is why we're, this is, I think, the main reason for why we decided to create this podcast, because there are great people like you. There are amazing stories, creative stories. I mean, people sitting at home just feeling that they had enough need to know that one person or even a small group of people can make a huge difference. And I think these two stories are a perfect example of that. So again, I'm very grateful that you are willing to come here and be with us today. And I'm sure it will be an inspiration for a lot of people coming in the next few years going forward. And thanks again for everything that you are doing.
And Aoife, as a friend and a fan, thank you to you for everything that you're doing. It's amazing work.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Gideon. All right, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.